configure service discovery for Prometheus. To begin, let's understand what service discovery is. If you come to our Prometheus Grafana learning and you come to our Prometheus architecture, what we have done previously is we have manually added our targets. We've added our targets manually to make use of a node exporter, which will automatically add those servers to our Prometheus server. But what we are going to configure now is we'll be configuring service discovery. With service discovery is going to automatically find targets and enlist these targets in our Prometheus configuration. When I say manual configuration of targets, what does that mean? If you come back to our instances, let me select instances. Let me go to our Prometheus server. We are going to go to our Prometheus server. So if you come to instances, we are on our Prometheus server. If I click on connect and then I select the instance SSH details, let's end the session for our server 2. I'll exit this. Now I want to SSH into our Prometheus server. I'll SSH into the Prometheus server. Now once I SSH into the Prometheus server, I want to cut the prometheus.yaml file. So if I cut the prometheus.yaml file, remember the prometheus.yaml file is found in etc prometheus, and then we can do prometheus.yaml. So this is the YAML file. If you look at this YAML file, for us to get the YAML file, I had to do cat etc prometheus.yaml. If you take a look at this file, we added this host in our previous module. We added the host individually. We added the local host 90, which was by default configured when we set up Prometheus, and then we added this for our app server, and we later on added this for our web server. And this, remember, is using static configurations to script. Remember, in our documentation here in the Prometheus configuration, under our script configs, they say targets may be statically configured via the static configs parameter. So we use the static configs parameter for us to add our targets. But now with service discovery, if you come back to the official Prometheus documentation, with service discovery, we are going to be making use of service discovery. And because we are using Amazon EC2, we are going to look for service discovery for EC2. So if you click here on service discovery, we have EC2 SD for service discovery config. So if you click on EC2 service discovery config, they say EC2 service discovery configuration allow retrieving script targets from AWS EC2 instances. The private IP addresses is used by default but may be changed to public addresses with relabeling. Now the IAM credentials used must have the EC2 described permission and so on. So we are going to be creating an IAM role that will give Prometheus the permissions needed to access. So basically, this is what the service configuration file looks like. You specify the AWS region, you specify an endpoint, you specify access key and secret access key, which is not the best practice. That's why we are going to be using an IAM role. And then you can go ahead now to specify your various configurations. So for us to configure service config for AWS EC2, if you come to my repository, we already have a service configuration file by default. So if you click on Prometheus Grafana setups, if you come here, you will see a YAML file called Prometheus Service. If you come to my repository, you will see we have this YAML file, Prometheus Service Discovery. You click here, you have this file. Remember, currently we are using our script configs as static configs, but if you look at this file, our script configs are no longer static configs, they are EC2 service discovery configs. So what we are going to do is we'll start by configuring this. Let's copy this. It's inside the Prometheus and Grafana learning repository. I'll copy this. Now I'll open the VS Code. We already have this VS Code. You can open any VS Code terminal. You can create a new file and call it test.yaml. If you have any VS Code terminal open, you can create a file and call it test.yaml. Once you create a file called test.yaml, you want to paste this service discovery code in the YAML file. So again, what I did, I came to the repository Prometheus and Grafana learning. I copy our service discovery configuration file. This is Prometheus service discovery.yaml. I'll copy the YAML file. I open any VS Code terminal and I paste the service discovery file. Now for the script config name, we are going to call the name node. Now for the script config type, the configs which we are using is EC2 service discovery configs. If you come to the official Prometheus documentation, there are other service configurations which you can use depending on your project. Because we are running it on AWS, we are using the EC2, which is the EC2 Service Discovery config. You could use Docker Service Discovery config, Azure Service Discovery config, and the like, Kubernetes Service Discovery config. For our case, we are using the EC2 Service Discovery config. Now, in our VS Code, because it is not the best practice to pass the user access key and secret access key, we are going to delete these two lines because we don't need to pass our access key and secret access key. We'll create an IAM role to give the necessary permissions for Prometheus. So I'll delete those two access key and secret access key. Let me undo so we can have a better look. If I select both access key and secret access key and I delete these, we no longer expose our access key and secret access key. So basically, you just want to have the region and the port. Now for the region, you also want to change this region to correspond to the AWS region in which you are working. If I come to my configuration here and come to my console, I'm working in the North Virginia region. I can click here and I'll see North Virginia. North Virginia is the US East 1 region. So I'll come back to my VS Code and I'll change this region to US East 1 to correspond to my region, the region in which I am working. Now, once I set up this, basically it's the same. The global configurations, script interval is 15 seconds. The label is Prometheus. The script configs which I'm using, I want to call this job name node to specify that I'm picking up the instances for my node. This Prometheus will be the default. And then now I'm working in the region US East 1, and then I'll be listening on port 9100. So what this basically means is it goes to your AWS account in US East 1 region. Every instance that has been configured and it has node exporter by default configured, it's going to automatically discover those targets. So now, once I've done this configuration, I'll copy all of this code. I'll come back to my Prometheus server. I'll do an ls. I'm in Prometheus Grafana Learning. I'll cd to the etc. This is the Prometheus server I'm logged into. I'll cd into ect Prometheus and then hit enter. So let me clear my screen. If I do a pwd, you see I'm in the etc Prometheus directory. If I do an ls, you see there's a prometheus.yaml file. So what I'll do is this file which I've modified, I'll copy this file. While I'm in the etc Prometheus directory, if I cut the prometheus.yaml file, this is the YAML file for our static configuration. But because we want to do service discovery, we are going to completely replace this file. And for us to completely replace this file, I'll do sudo vi and then I'll get into the prometheus.yaml file. I hit enter, sudo vi prometheus.yaml. Once I'm in this file, I'll get in insert mode. I'll press I to get in insert mode. Now, once you're in insert mode, you want to delete all the content in this file. So I'll just delete all the content in this file to avoid errors. I'll delete all the content in this file to avoid errors in my configuration file. Now, once I delete all the content, I'll come back here. This is the same configuration file here. I'll copy this configuration file. Once I've deleted all the content in my Prometheus.yaml file, I'll paste this new content. So basically, I'm just replacing just the script configs because previously we had our global configurations the same. We've just changed the script configs from using static to using service discovery. Once you've set this up, you exit the insert mode by pressing escape key on the keyboard. Then you press :W cure and you put the exclamation and you hit enter. So now, if I cut this new Prometheus.yaml, take note, previously our Prometheus.yaml was using script configs, static configuration to script metrics. We call the job Prometheus and we're using static configuration to specify statically the target servers which we are going to use. But now, if you come to our updated Prometheus.yaml file, we've given the job name node, because we want to distinguish it from this other job. We've given it a job name node. Now, if you see here, the script configs is using EC2 service discovery. Previously, we're using static configs, but now we are using EC2 service discovery to enable us get the various servers dynamically from our EC2 console or from our AWS account in the specified region. And again, we have specified that we want to get the configs from our US East 1 region, and we are looking the configs from port 9100. Now, once we've configured this, we have to restart our Prometheus service. So we do sudo systemctl restart. We restart our Prometheus service. So we do prometheus.service. So this will enable us to restart our Prometheus service. I'll hit enter. We have sudo system serial restart Prometheus service. This will give us the possibility to restart our Prometheus service. Now, if our Prometheus service is restarted, we come back to our Prometheus tab here. If you refresh, take note, for you to get here, you click on status and you click on targets. Now, when you click on targets, take note, you do not see any configurations. Why? Because in our prometheus.yaml file, we are not given the necessary credentials for Prometheus to access our AWS account to automatically pick servers. So for us to grant that permission, we need to come back to our AWS console. We click on IAM. We are going to be creating a role to give Prometheus access. Remember, if you refresh, we are not able to see any targets in our Prometheus server because we are using an updated configuration file, which is a service discovery Prometheus.yaml configuration file. So for us to give it the necessary configuration, we come to the IAM service. You click on the IAM service. You click on roles. Now, while you're on roles, you click on create role. Now, this role we are creating is for the EC2 because we want to give Prometheus the ability to access our EC2 resources. So we select EC2 for commonly used services. Now, once you select EC2 for commonly used services, you take next. Now, we are going to add the necessary permissions for Prometheus to have access to our given server. Now, for the permission which we are going to be adding the permissions for EC2 full access. In some use cases, you want to do fine-grained least privilege mode, but for the purpose of this exercise, we are going to be giving the permission Amazon read-only access. We are going to be giving EC2 read only. So this is the permission which we are going to be giving Amazon EC2 read only. We want to give Prometheus the ability just to read. So we give just the read only permissions. So once you select this permission, read only permission, you take next. Now we can give this role the name Prometheus Service Discovery role. Now, once you give the role the name Prometheus Service Discovery role, we can scroll down and then we click on create role. You give the name Prometheus Service Discovery role and you scroll down, you can click create role. If you click on view role, you should be able to see the Prometheus Service Discovery role, and this role basically has just one permission, the permission which is the Amazon EC2 read only access. Now, once you have this read-only access, we are going to come back to our EC2 instances. You click on instances. When you click on instances, now we select our Prometheus server. Once you select the Prometheus server, you come to actions. After clicking on actions, you come to security. You click on security, and under security, you click on modify IAM role. So basically, we are just adding that role to the Prometheus server. Now, assuming you already have an experience running these services, you automatically just add this on instance creation. We are just doing this subsequently just for the purpose of understanding. So I'll click on IAM role. I'll search for my Prometheus. So I have the Prometheus SD role. So I'll select the Prometheus SD for the Prometheus Service Discovery role. Once I select Prometheus Service Discovery role, I'll update IAM role. Now, once I update the IAM role, it means that I've added the permissions for the Prometheus to have read-only access to EC2 console in my AWS North Virginia region. Once this is set up, I come back to my Prometheus server here and I refresh this. And if you refresh now, you will see we now have the nodes have automatically been picked up. Previously, we could not see the nodes because we do not have our server automatically configured. Now, while it is being loaded, you see node 0 of 3. Again, if you take note, it is using the private IP of all the individual nodes. Service Discovery makes use of the private IP. If you want to change into public IP, you could change that in the settings file, but by default, Service Discovery makes use of the private IP. So if I refresh this, you'll now see we have our various servers. The first server we have the 172.31.14.130. This server, if you come to our EC2 instances, if you look at our web server is 14.130. So if you come to your Prometheus server here, we have 14.130. This corresponds to our web server. This is the web server private IP. 172.31.14.130 is the same thing here. 172.31.14.130. And then if you equally come here to our app server is 172.31.6.248. If you come back here, you see we have 172.31.6.248. These two servers that are up are web server and the app server. Now the server that is down is the Prometheus server. Why is the Prometheus server down? If you see here, the Prometheus server public IP or private IP ends with 245. And if you come here, it's the 245, which is a Prometheus server that is down. Why is this particular server down? Remember, in our service discovery configuration, we've mentioned to service discovery listing to targets that are exporting metrics on port 9100. So our service discovery is currently exporting targets, or is currently reading targets from EC2 instances that are being exported on port 9100. So you want to use port 9000, or we are using port 9100 to export the metrics. That is why if you come back to our Prometheus targets, you see 2 targets are up and 1 down. The 2 targets that are up are our web and app server, and then the 1 target that is down is our Prometheus server, because we are not exporting logs through port 9090, which is the Prometheus port. If you were to add such a configuration, you could just come to the port here and add a new port to specify the Prometheus port, which is 9090. So this is basically how service discovery works with Prometheus. In our next module, we are going to be configuring Grafana with Prometheus as our data source.